What a journey this has been. So this is the Ohlins TTX22 metric 230 by 62.5. So it's a 65 straight down to a 62.5 at the shop. Pretty basic stuff. Rebound, just low speed. So the high speed's preset, or the beginning strokes preset. And we got high speed compression, low speed compression. The 18 clicks of low speed and just the 3 positions of high speed. When I first got this shot, I ordered it, and I ordered it with a 388 spring. So Ohlins 388 spring. Just assuming spring rates are somewhat relative to other brands' spring rates, or kind of accurate with each other, which they're not. I'll get to that after. But anyway, 388, couple of spring calculators both put me on around this money, 385 to 400. So Marzocchi, I've been running the 400 with no preload, so that's about as stiff as I can go on this bike. It's quite a progressive bike, so it's, some people would say it's not that progressive. It's 27% ish, which to me, for a coil or for anything at 160mm travel, is maybe just a little bit too progressive. Definitely a little bit too progressive. 20 to 24 seems to be perfect for my way of setting bikes up. But anyway, that's irrelevant for now. The shot was not completely irrelevant, but it's off topic. It came with very little support, so it was quite, with the 388 spring, low in the sag, so well, not terribly low, but good low in the sag, but just, hang on, yeah, that's right, yeah. Low in the sag, so I had to ramp up the compression, so I was 5 out from closed on the high, on the low, and I believe I had the high and middle to get support. But on track, it felt disgusting. It was catching up on it was kind of and it was catching on square edges. So did what I could to change it and find support there. Had a really good setup, and it felt quite good. But then I got talking to people in the comments about the top out that it was creating. So the rebound stroke has a really prominent top out unless you slow it down. So usable range, there's 5 clicks, and you can only really use closed to 3 clicks out from closed. 4 clicks out and 5 clicks out, just top out. So I wasn't into that. And a couple of you guys were saying maybe it was bladder pressure, so we went through that. Went through the bladder pressure, we upped the pressure to recommended, which is 12 bar. Now that, or 175 psi. Now that put me, same spring, same everything, put me super tall in the back and well and truly too stiff. So I went from almost closed on the compression settings to all the way open, looking for some compliance, looking to get the shop to get out of the way of things, and it just would not work. So I dropped the spring rate, I went to the 365 spring. So I got a 365 Ohlins spring, so it's been an expensive process. 365 at the newfound 12 bar, or recommended 12 bar. So to me, my early assumption was the shot probably came with about 6 bar in it, about 6 or 7 bar in it. So well and truly under the stated recommended setting, which is what they should have, what I would assume they would have set at the factory, but it wasn't. So anyway, enter the 365 with that 12 bar, still just super choppy, just no compliance. Wind any compression on, it just gets way worse. You can't get zero preload with the 365. Still had me a little tall versus the softer bladder pressure, and the 388 had me a little deeper in the sag. So that bladder pressure makes a huge difference to perceived spring rate, I guess, or the amount of support the shock creates, even at sag. Even at static support. So I kept the 365 on, and I went down to 11 bar really no difference, very little difference. 10 bar, little bit better, little bit, I could start to find, oh yeah, here's a little bit of compliance. And then I went down to 9 bar and found great compliance. I found quite good compliance. So I feel like 9 bar with the 365 was the best I got. So that's where I was at when I did the back-to-back test with the Marzocchi Bomber versus the Ohlins setup. But saying that, I might actually delete that video. I might leave it. But because when I put the Marzocchi on, I didn't actually have it set to the optimal setup, which I've only just learnt previously. I've only just kind of come aware of that previously, just recently. Because I've taken this out and I've sent it, done a big trail ride the other day, and just fine-tuned back to, and I've landed exactly back to where I have been in the past, which is literally zero preload, no preload, 8 clicks of low-speed compression, and the rebound quite slow. Now, I think the rebound quite slow is because of how progressive the bike is. There's a lot of kick at the end of the stroke on any bike with 27% progression. It's just a little bit too much force off the end of the stroke. So you got to run that high speed rebound or the beginning stroke rebound slow or slower on a more progressive bike in order to open up that high speed that low speed rebound and have your bike playful and with a little bit of energy off the back of things. So 9 bar was my best finding. Now, since going back to perfect setup on this, I'm going to have to retract my statement of this shot performed better than that at optimal, because this is definitely performing better than this at optimal. When I'm out and about, it's more free range, it's more playful, feels at home, feels comfortable, feels confident. It feels really good, which this felt really quite good as well. But in the video I did, I kind of lent on this performing better than that because it kind of surprised me. I thought, oh, this doesn't feel that good actually. Maybe I was wrong, but I just didn't have it set up where I should have had it set up. So I told you this was going to be a long one. Anyway, that was the best setup. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to have to go back to Ohlins recommended because I still don't know how it feels at recommended with an adequate spring rate. So I went back up to 12 bar and I bought myself a 343 spring rate. So this is a 343. Now, just a quick side topic. This 365 feels almost a tiny bit stiffer than the 400 at no preload. So they're almost identical. The 400 Fox is almost identical support wise on that shock, not on this shock, on that shock. So I've tried these springs on this shock, all different springs on this shock. This 365 feels exactly or absolutely very, very close to the Fox 400. So spring rate for spring rate, brands are not the same. Brands are not the same. So you've got to keep that in mind if you're swapping shocks or swapping brand of spring and you're trying to get your spring rate right. So there may be a little bit of back and forth to find that. Anyway, 343, back to 12 bar. It just felt rubbish. It felt sluggish, like a little bit sluggish, but also firm and choppy. Catching hits, not super compliant. Good climbing speed, reasonable climbing speed, but not super compliant. Not really compliant at all. And when you get into rough stuff, it was horrible. It was just garbage. I couldn't really carry speed anywhere. Mainly because undersprung, overdamped. So not only was it catching on the bumps, but it didn't have enough energy in the spring to propel me forward and keep me on top of things. So it didn't feel good at all. So I think if you're going to buy this or you already have one, there's a high chance that if it came from the factory, it's not at the factory recommended settings. A friend of mine bought one the same time as I bought one, and his shock is way more compliant. So it's got the same internal tune, same everything, but it's much softer spring rate for spring rate. So, or it seems much softer to me. So I would say that being that this didn't come at its recommended, what the factory itself specifies for the bladder pressure tells me either Ohlins knows that the bladder pressure they run for their compression tune is way too high, or there's not good, and they're not stating that they run it lower, but they actually do run it lower, but they don't publicly disclose that information. Or there's poor quality control, and they're just going out at whatever pressure old mate at the end of the assembly line decides to do at that moment in time. So I don't know what the go is there. I don't know whether there's some quality control issues within Ohlins. The first 388 spring I got was super warped, so if I'd roll it on a table, it'd roll up, roll back, roll up, roll back. It wouldn't continue its roll consistently. It wasn't a perfect cylinder. It was bowed. The spring wasn't vertically up and down. It was like it had been twisted like that a little bit. So a little bit of quality control there. The 343 spring that I bought is okay. The 365 spring that I've got is a little bit warped, but definitely not like the 385. The 385 they sent me as a replacement is fine. It's not warped. So, sure, Ohlins got a great reputation and have got some excellent products, but standard tune, nah, it's garbage. You either run a lighter bladder pressure. So if there's anyone out there that's had one serviced and it's come back and you've gone, oh, it feels completely different, it's probably because the bladder pressure has been set at factory recommended, whereas when you first got it, it was low. So overall, not impressed. Not impressed at all. So if I was to keep this shock and keep this bike, so I'm moving on to another bike soonish. If I wanted to keep just burying money into this thing, I'd change it to a lighter compression tune and stick with the 12 bar recommended, because you know that every time you service it, it's going to come back at 12 bar from the service center. So you want a compression tune that suits it. And also, you definitely want to change this rebound tune. I don't know why they've got it set up where it tops out. To me, it feels like the beginning stroke or the high speed rebound is too fast. So you've got to slow that, which would work on a less progressive bike. I don't know if it would work well. I don't know if it's still going to be restrictive, but it would work on a 20% progression or an 18% progression. Then you'd have, if you were to go to 18, you'd have bottom out issues anyway. So you'd have to run it oversprung, which means you definitely want to be going slower on the rebound. On the high speed, but not the low speed. So we're getting deep into the weeds. But yeah, rebound stroke is wrong, in my opinion. Rebound stroke wants to... And I spoke about the top out. I spoke about when I went to 12 bar, I thought the top out was gone. But incorrect. The top out was gone because at 12 bar was so stiff that I had to run the rebound quite a bit slower, which eliminated the top out. So like I said earlier, anywhere from 3 clicks out from closed is usable rebound range, but it's just slow and garbage. It's just like slow and soggy. It's soggy as hell. You go to 4 clicks out and that's where you want it, but it's starting to top out. And you go to 5 clicks out and it's like, oh, that's a little bit too wild, and it's way toppy out. So yeah, not impressed, not super stoked. If I had my time again, because this all started with a Cane Creek Katsuma, and the only reason the Katsuma went back is because it was topping out. It was constantly, didn't matter what I did with the rebound stroke, it was topping out. It had a clunk at the top of the stroke. So I sent it back. They gave me a new one, did the exact same thing. I sent it back. They replaced it with an Ohlins. This thing does the same thing, but it's got less adjustability and more restriction within its standard setup that you get it at. So not happy, not impressed. If I had my time again, I'd definitely stick with the Katsuma because the adjustment is very broad and very easy to do. So you got finger adjustment for high and low speed compression, finger adjustment for high and low speed rebound, and plenty of room between all of that to tune. So still that shock has the top out issue that I've been talking about, but outside of that, that would have been the preferred shock. So that's it for this shock. Sorry it couldn't be better. Super disappointed. I thought this thing was going to be a hitter. And it's funny because it was at the start when it had really low bladder pressure. It had signs of being quite good, but just slight weaknesses. But once I went down the rabbit hole of all of that and then realizing the bladder pressure was low, it's just, yeah, let down for sure. So Ohlins, you might be killer everywhere, but in the mountain bike game, you've got to change those standard tunes, I think. You've got to change that standard tune. You've got to slow the high-speed rebound down a little bit and open the compression up. Open the high-speed compression up especially a little bit. Yeah, that's it.